the decision for trach for us, part of it was because of how important it was for her to talk. Verbal communication was so important for her. She was beyond her age, her years verbally, and I listen to videos now. It's like, I have like recordings that are like over 30 minutes of her just talking the whole time. This is on BiPap with really high pressures. And I'm thinking like, it's hard for a normal person to talk for 30 minutes at a time, you know? And here she was but she did, and she did that all the time. It was so important for her to communicate. She would get upset, and she didn't get upset very often, but when we couldn't understand her, like sometimes it was hard to understand her, she would get upset, like tears would flow. And so it was so important for her to be understood and communicate that way, that the decision to put in a trach that would limit that and potentially give complications and that kind of thing, it just was not the right decision for us. And that was a very difficult decision, but in our hearts, we knew that that wasn't the right path for us.
Did you, is that a conversation you had with a specialist or with a palliative care person? Like who did you have that conversation or those conversations with?
So with my husband, with our family, and then like I as she was getting sicker and in the hospital, I would have conversations with the pulmonologist about what would a trach be like? What is life like with a trach? What are the complications? That kind of thing. And so they told me. So I learned a lot more about it than I knew. I guess one of my concerns was before, if you have a trach, that I didn't know that if she could even be mobile, if she could leave her room. And so I learned that that she could, that there's a battery operated vent that she could have and that kind of thing. So I learned about that. The pulmonologist told me that some kids with the trach, they're in the hospital every few months or at least every year with an infection. Some of them have to have a lot of airway clearance with a trach, and some don't. And there was really no way to tell us if she would be one of those people that had problems or not. No guarantee, basically. There was also no guarantee that having a trach would prolong her life. And she was also pretty stable on that BiPap, unless she got sick. If she got sick and she had the trach, maybe it would make it easier to clear the airway, but maybe it wouldn't. Basically, no one could give me a guarantee. Well, yeah. We think that this is going to really help. It will help not even the quality of her life, but no one could tell me that this would extend the quantity of her life. No one could say that, or it had a good chance of doing that. It was very, very, basically they didn't know. And so I took that uncertainty with the risk of complications, and knowing how important it was for her to communicate verbally, and that really, that informed our decision. So yeah, we talked to the pulmonologist, and then we talked to the palliative care team about that. That's how that went.
Was there any pressure that you were receiving to get a trach, or were you all in this gray zone together where everybody understood that in the absence of a crystal ball, it became about trade-offs?
So the ENT, which I like him, but he seemed a little bit surprised. I think in his view, that a trach was a pretty simple procedure. I think he said something like, if it was my kid, I would get a trach. Which I didn't really, until after that, I didn't really realize that, that's, it was an interesting thing to say at a care conference. But in previous conversations with him, I honestly don't think he was thinking about the situation, because Julianna had a progressive neuromuscular disease. It's not like she had a stenosis or something that could be corrected and that kind of thing. And he even caught himself once. He said, you know, when we were talking about trach before, he was saying, well, it can be, you can take it out. And then he said, well, that probably wouldn't happen in this case. And it obviously wouldn't happen. It's not like she was going to get better. So he did say that, but I honestly think he wasn't looking at the whole picture, and he wasn't thinking about the complications that could happen.